Well, chapter 14 of the book of Judges now that we're going to get into, learning a little bit more about Samson's life as he is born and starting to grow up. And remember, he is a Nazirite, which means he's set aside to be dedicated to God and God's work and service, basically. So his birth has shown a good similarities and example of the Savior's birth. And now let's see how his life and choices are shaping up to help us understand him is he going to follow that pattern of being the Savior or not? It's his choice. Okay, Samson slays a young lion with his bare hands. He marries a Philistine wife, propounds a riddle, is deceived by his wife, and slays 30 Philistines. So he's got some choices here. And even though he's been dedicated and set aside to be a devout follower of Christ, of God, he still has his choice, his ability to make a choice. So verse 1, and Samson went down to Timnath and saw a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. So he sees this woman, basically, who's a Philistine. And he came up and told his father and his mother and said, I have seen a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me to wife. Now, it's important to realize Samson, of course, was born with a spiritual gift of phenomenal strength. This guy is really strong, really, really capable of doing things. Almost superhero-ish, if you think about it. I wouldn't say like a Hulk, but not that far off, probably. Type of a thing, like a Hercules type character, something like that. Verse 3, then his father and his mother said unto him, is there never a woman among the daughters of thy brethren, or among all my people, that thou goest to take a wife of the uncircumcised Philistines? So they're saying, hey, look, isn't there, out of all the children of Israel, isn't there any beautiful girls in Israel that you would like to marry? Why are you trying to go after the enemy, marry a woman from the enemy? Okay, remember, Israel is in bondage to the Philistines. The Philistines, and Israel wants out from that bondage. The Philistines are seen as their enemy to an extent, and they want to get away from them. So in this context of Samson being a representative of Christ, Philistines would represent the world, basically, and worldliness. So he wants to go marry into worldliness. So he's definitely making choices not conducive for him to be a good example of Christ-like behavior or being like a Christ. And Samson said unto his father, get her for me, for she pleaseth me well. Now he seems kind of a demanding kid here, basically, and the thing is he's honestly, by the time he's old enough to start marrying and doing things like this, he probably is pretty well known for his strength and his abilities. Things that the average person would get really, really tired doing are simple. Like he's just warming up by the time the average person is exhausted. So he probably knows his strength. He knows his gifts, and he may be a little prideful and cocky because of those gifts. And that might be part of the problem that he's having here. Verse 4, but his father and his mother knew not that it was of the Lord, that he sought an occasion against the Philistines. For at that time the Philistines had dominion over Israel. So what verse 4 gives us a glimpse into is understanding that he's not just looking for a wife to marry. He's looking to mess with the Philistines. That's part of his grand plan to get out from underneath the Philistines, is to psychologically mess with them by marrying into them and getting to know them and hanging out with them, and then getting Israel out from underneath them, basically. So he's very cocky in his attitudes and confident what he can do. So verse 5, went Samson down, and his father and his mother, to Timnath, and came to the vineyards of Timnath, and behold, a young lion roared against him. So they're down there, they're in the vineyards, and a lion came out. Now, there's not necessarily lions in the Middle East so much, but it could be like a tiger or something that would be a little more native to the area, maybe had come out to see them. It's not an impossibility to have a lion up there. There are lions in Africa, but that's a heck of a journey for an average lion to go, because they have to make it through Egypt and other things like that, get across the Nile, which is crocodile, has lots of crocodiles and things in it. So it's more likely like a leopard or another type of, like a tiger or other type of animal as well as possible. But anyways, here's the point. Okay, verse 6, the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he rent him as he would have rent a kid. And he had nothing in his hand, but he told not his father or his mother what he had done. And he went down and talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. So he's on his way. We learn here Samson and his mom and his dad are on their way down to ask go to the parents of this woman who's a Philistine and see if Samson could marry his daughter, basically. On the way down, there's a lion that comes out to go against him. He goes and fights the lion and takes care of it. And it says he rent him as he would have rent a kid. Now, a kid meaning like a goat or a sheep. So he pretty much took this animal down and barehandedly probably snapped his neck, pulled limbs off this animal, quartered him, just destroyed this animal. Didn't just kill him, like strangle him or stab him, but really mangled this animal, basically. And then he didn't bother telling his folks the details of it as they were going. So verse 8, and after a time he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. Now, bees, and if you have some more information on this, please put it in the comments. I'd love to see this a bit more. Here's the thing they have to realize is this might sound strange. Oh, bees in a carcass of a lion? What are you talking about? This is kind of a strange thing. And honey in there as well. So honeybees were pretty abundant down there. This is a very important thing. Bees, if you ever study ancient Egypt, they talk a lot about bees and their importance. Bees were seen as this opportunity to take things that were dead and make new life out of them. Granted, I don't know if they necessarily did a good job of delineating the difference between a bee and a fly. Basically, they both had larvae. They both did, got onto things like that. So it could not necessarily be a honeybee using the carcass, but maybe flies using the carcass as well. But there is, the beauty is bees represent a symbol of taking death and converting it into new life somewhere else. So a good example of resurrection, principles of resurrection effects, really cool. They could be that the carcass has been picked over pretty good and bees are coming in, like using the rib cage mainly to form a bee hive, to use some of the enclosure to help give them a place to live. I mean, you think about it, bees today, they'll live in the cavity of your wall. There's numerous times you hear of people, they have a hollow tree, bees will go in that cavity in that hollow tree and build up their nests, and actually you can get honey out of them. Sometimes when beekeepers will be called to a house, they're remodeling an older home, they hear a buzzing sound on the wall, they pull the wall back and find a hive of honeybees in the wall, and they'll have honey inside there in the honeycomb and things. So it's not necessarily uncommon for this to happen, because the bees could be using the bones, the skeletal structure of this carcass to house a hive, to do things. So we just have to make sure we're clear on, just understanding this a little bit more. All right, verse 9, and he took thereof in his hands and went on eating, and came to his father and mother, and he gave them, and they did eat. So they got the honey, some of the honey, and he brought it out, probably still in the honeycomb. So they're eating the comb, the wax, and the honey together. But he told not them that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. So he didn't bother giving that details, like, oh, where'd you get this honey? Oh, I found some honey over here, a hive, and so here's some honey for you. Oh, great, it's great. How weird is it? There's a hive over there. Yeah. Oh yeah. By the way, I found this in the carcass of a dead animal. They'd be like, blah, blah, what are you talking about? Don't eat this. This is bad. At least that's how I would envision it. You can tell me in the comments what you think about it. So verse 10, so his father went down unto the woman, and Samson made there a feast, for so used the young men to do. So now they go down, father goes down, gets the woman, and Samson makes a feast. This is a tradition, basically, to entreat her. Verse 11, it came to pass when they saw him that they brought 30 companions to be with him. So his father goes and gets her. She is a little nervous about this because they know who Samson is. They know that he's this freaking amazing, strong guy, has phenomenal abilities, and he wants her to wife. But these are Israelites. They're the enemy. There's a lot of things between Philistines and Israelites. It isn't good. Not a lot of friendliness there. So they're a little concerned for her life. So they end up sending 30 companions with her. We're going to learn more about those here pretty soon. And Samson said unto them, I will now put forth a riddle unto you. If ye can certainly declare it with me within the 7 days of the feast and find it out, then I will give you 30 sheets and 30 change of garments. So he's saying, I'm going to give you clothes, great clothes and robes like tunics, things like that to wear. If in the 7 days we're having this feast, which is a common when people get married and do things, they kind of have this big long feast with the families of the two people coming together, and some of the other people around them as well. So he's going to give them a riddle. And if they can answer the riddle within the 7 days, he's going to give them 30 sheets, 30 changes of garments. So he's going to give each one of these 30 companions new clothes, basically. Verse 13, though, but if ye cannot declare it me, then shall ye give me 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments. So he's saying, if you can't answer this, though, you owe me, each of you owe me a sheet. So I get 30 sheets and 30 garments for myself. So it's the same gift, either direction, but it's a lot for him because it's all given to one person instead of him giving 30 people one thing each. And they said unto him, put forth thy riddle that we may hear it. So they're like, all right, we're in. We're going to go through this too. So verse 14, and he said unto them, out of the eater came forth meat. Out of the strong came forth sweetness. And they could not in 3 days expound the riddle. Now, if you think about what he's talking about, out of the eater came forth meat. What's an eater? Something that is eating and you got meat from it. So it's something like an animal that eats others and you got meat from them. Okay, probably talking about this lion. And out of the strong came forth sweetness. He got honey out of the carcass of a strong lion that he had killed. Remember, I believe that's what the riddle is this experience he had with this lion, basically. But they couldn't. They've gone 3 days. They can't figure out what this riddle is. So verse 15, and it came to pass let me back up. There's a note here, 30 changes of garments. There's something I need to talk about here. The correct word is Kalifot, which means armor. He was going to give them armor, basically. I'll give you guys armor, new armor if you can win. If you can't, then you give me your armor, basically. So, verse 15, it came to pass on the 7th day that they said unto Samson's wife, entice thy husband that he may declare unto us the riddle, lest we burn thee and thy father's house with fire. Have ye called us to take what we have? Is it not so? So they go to his wife and they're like, hey, wife, you need to, because we don't know her name in this as of yet, basically. Hey, can you figure out, get out of your husband what this is so that we can win this contest, basically. If you don't get this for us, we are going to destroy you and your dad and your household, basically, your family, that's steep. I mean, just you think about this riddle, okay, and it's just a silly riddle. Why are they putting such a big emphasis on this? Well, this is not a silly riddle. Okay, you have to realize this is Samson that the Philistines are dealing with. They know Samson is this mighty guy and does phenomenal. He's like a superhero. He's kind of a Captain America type guy, big and strong, a Hercules type figure. If you think about Hercules from the Greek mythology, he can wipe these guys out, and they're a little intimidated by him, which is why there's 30 armed men hanging out with Samson's new wife, basically. So And if they lose, they have to give up their armor, which puts them in a vulnerable position against Samson. So as far as they're concerned, this could mean life or death for them. And so they're threatening her and her parents and family with life or death as well to figure this out. So verse 16, Samson's wife wept before him, which makes sense. She's going to put an emotional spin on things, and said, Thou dost but hate me, and lovest me not. Thou hast put forth a riddle unto the children of my people, and hast not told it to me. So she's like, oh, you hate me. You don't really love me. Playing on his emotions. How many times? I'm not saying all women do this, but let's face it, ladies, if you put in the comments whether you agree or disagree with me on this, playing emotions is your forte. It's not uncommon, especially when you're trying to deal with a man like your husband. Acting a little bit does help to get your way sometimes, doesn't it? I mean, think about it. Let's be honest here. So I'd love to see look forward to your comments about that as well. And so she's like, you didn't tell me about this riddle. You haven't explained the riddle to me or what's going on. I'm supposed to be your wife. We're supposed to trust each other. Why have you not explained me this riddle, basically? And he said unto her, Behold, I have not told it my father nor my mother. And shall I tell it thee? So he took her logic to a whole nother level here, because she's like, look, we're supposed to be, again, trusting each other. Why can't you trust me with this as well? And he's going, but I haven't even trusted my own mom and dad with this. Why should I trust you with it? So he totally took her logic and moved it to a whole nother level to go, I don't even tell my mom and dad this. And so she's like, oh, I'm kind of stuck. What do I do with that logic? So verse 17, and she wept before him the 7 days. So they've already been 3 days in. So that's 4 days of crying. She's emotionally distraught around him. Again, an effort to get him to say. So while their feast lasted, and it came to pass on the 7th day that he told her, because she lay sore upon him. So she kept pushing him and crying and moaning, and you're not nice to me, and you don't really love me, and you don't take care of me, and you don't value me, and blah, 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 really pushing him on his emotions and getting him stirred up. So finally he's like, okay, honey, okay. It's the 7th day. They haven't figured it out. They haven't got it by now. They're probably not going to get it. I'll tell you the riddle, basically. So he told her the riddle, and she went out and told the children of her people, as it says here. She told the riddle to the children of her people. So she went out, told others, who then told others. So it got through the Philistine nation the answer to this riddle. So verse 18, the men of the city said unto him on the 7th day, before the sun went down, what is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion? And he said unto them, if ye had not plowed with my heifer, ye had not found out my riddle. So let's talk about this for just a second here. Okay. So they come in verse 18, they come back and they answer his riddle. It's a lion. And there's this carcass of a lion over here that you killed. And we came across it and we found it and we see this. And he's going, they didn't figure out this for 7 days. And now they suddenly do it after I told my new wife this. And he realizes what has happened. And so he uses a bit of a metaphor here. If ye had not plowed with my heifer, ye had not found out my riddle. So he's kind of talking about, if you basically called his new wife, a heifer, and basically said, if you hadn't had worked over my wife, you would not know this. So it finally dawns on him, her whole act was to get her to convince him to tell her about it so she could go tell the rest of her Philistine family about this so that they could then win. And he realizes this is what's going on, basically, that they cheated. Basically, they didn't actually solve the riddle. They manipulated her to manipulate him to learn it. They cheated. So verse 19, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon and slew 30 men of them, and took their spoil, and gave change of garments unto them, which expounded the riddle. And his anger was kindled, and he went up to his father's house. So this is what happened here, basically. Okay, remember, garments is Kalifot is the correct word. He went down, he killed the 30 warriors, and he took their armor, and he dropped it off in front of the rest of the people, basically showing them, yeah, the riddle was a lion, But the lion really stood for me, Samson. Samson, not Samsung, the electronics company, Samson. Uh, he went and killed 30 of their warriors and took their armor and showed them, I just killed 30 of your warriors myself, to show them, oh man, do not mess with the Samson guy. Holy cow. He was mad. And then he went back home to his parents' house after that, basically. So they really pushed him, and he came back mad and angry with them. Verse 20, but Samson's wife was given to his companion, whom he had used as his friend. So here's the thing that we want to look at here. He leaves, and he's like, you've betrayed me. So he's kind of like, we're calling the wedding off, basically. So Samson's wife, who the 7-day feast and all this stuff, where they're supposed to be betrothed to each other and married, is given to the best man. So she is now given to the best man for a wife, basically. And that's how this chapter ends. Kind of a crazy chapter. Crazy things are going on here. Samson is making some choices that aren't good. He's getting to know and becoming friendly with the Philistines. Symbolically, that is getting to know the world and being friendly with the world, and then trying to overcome the world by force. That's not correct. That's not a Christ-like way to do things. So he's not fitting that mold that he should be to be a good example of a savior to Israel. He physically is a savior to Israel, but not a spiritual savior. And so he's falling short of that standard expectation. But let's see what happens in the next chapter, as well as this feud between Samson and Israel and the Philistines starts to ratchet up to another level, basically. So we'll see you in the next chapter.